So it's great to have a chance to talk about the research that I'm interested in and that I do in my work here at Sussex. In the early 1990s in the UK, and earlier than that in Scandinavian countries, there was a very exciting challenge made to how sociology engaged in the lives of children, and how sociological thinking about children needed to progress. Up until then, sociology had primarily thought about children in relation to socialisation, how they would become an adult member of society, how they acquired the values and norms of a society, and perhaps more interest to sociologists, what happened when that went wrong. And this socialisation approach paralleled the sort of emphasis from psychology on developmentalism. So both of those perspectives were interested in what children would become in the future and the processes that would support or hinder their becoming the right kind of person for society and for their own aspirations and well-being. Now, these are both really important questions. However, they're a very narrow framing of what children's lives are about, what they're like, and what's important about childhood, both to the child and to society and to adults as well. So the challenge that I mentioned that came in the 1990s in the UK was stimulated primarily by a book published by Alison James and Alan Prout called Constructing and Reconstructing Childhood. And in that they argued that we needed to fundamentally see children in a different kind of way. What we needed to do was to think about them and ask the question empirically as to how are they social actors, and in what way do their actions and their meaning making and their own engagement in childhood make a difference to how we think about them sociologically. So their argument in summary was that we needed to recognise children as social actors from a sociological perspective and think about engaging academically with their lives in terms of the social institutions that structured those conditions of childhood and the intergenerational relations that make up the social space of adulthood and childhood together. I found this fascinating, and it led me towards thinking a lot about what it means to be a social actor and what it means to be agentic. Early on, I worked with Ian Hutchby, looking at the concept of agency and exploring it as a practical accomplishment rather than an inherent property of the child. And we concluded in that early work that success in being agentic was dependent on the context and the contingent factors in which children's lives were located. It also depended on having an idea of the social order that was prevailing in the circumstances in which the child was present. And the person who needed that idea were not just the adult actors, but also the child as well. And we could see through the empirical work of others that clearly children understood social orders, or at least they had a perception of them, and their own actions and accomplishments and goals were related to that engagement they had with the social order. So in short, we argued that agency is an interactional accomplishment and therefore needs to be taken account of in relation to material resources, discursive practices and ideologies. So we termed this children's social competence. I've worked with this concept now over a number of years and used it for empirical studies on matters such as children's experiences of flooding, but also more conceptual work to understand agency at a deeper kind of level. I've thought about and written about children's participation in adult processes, questions of ideology, trust and children's agency, and the ways in which ideologies of childhood, seeing children as incompetent and not as social actors, affects the ways in which they have a chance to be politicised about the social conditions of their lives. So currently I'm working on unpacking this concept further by looking at it in early childhood and in infancy and questioning if we're not agentic, then what are we in terms of being human? And if a baby is agentic, what does that mean for how we think about the social order of infancy? So I'm always interested in looking at the intersection between material structures, ideologies and intergenerational practices, and looking at how those impact on children's capacity and their scope to be agentic. Ultimately though, what I'm interested in is also thinking about how this can relate back to some of the major sociological work on phenomena that we normally associate with the adult world, or where it's so intrinsically assumed to relate to the adult world that that aspect's not even named. And I would like to see the possibility that every major sociological question brings into consideration the ways in which children as a social group and as a set of social actors are relevant for how we understand that phenomenon.